Welcome to this Grade 12 Life Sciences Explainer. Today, we're going to break down the absolutely incredible biology of the human eye. Whether you're gearing up for an exam or you're just genuinely fascinated by how our bodies work, you are definitely in the right place. Okay, let's just dive right in. The human eye is a literal marvel of biological engineering. I mean, think about it. It dynamically adjusts in real time to constantly process the world around us. It takes bouncing light rays from our environment and translates them into electrical impulses. Then, our brain interprets those impulses as a continuous, full-color, three-dimensional reality. It's wild! To really master this topic, we're going to follow the journey of light. We'll start with the anatomy of the eye, look at the pupillary mechanism, figure out how we focus through a process called accommodation, and finally, look at visual defects and their treatments. Let's kick things off with Section 1. Anatomy of the eye, following the journey of light. Think of the eye's overall structure like a master map. Fundamentally, the internal eye is split into three distinct layers. You've got the tough outer sclera, the vascular middle choroid, and the light-sensitive inner retina. As we move through these next few parts, just keep this basic map in the back of your mind so you can see how all these pieces fit together inside that protective, bony cavity in your skull. Right, so as a beam of light first arrives, it hits the sclera. That's the tough, white, inelastic layer. Because it doesn't stretch, the sclera does an amazing job of protecting the delicate inner workings and keeping the eyeball perfectly round. Now, as that light pushes to the very front, it meets the cornea. The cornea is a transparent, convex bulge. Being transparent lets the light pass right through, but that convex shape is crucial because it actually begins the whole process of refracting or bending the incoming light. And working behind the scenes, just beneath the sclera, is the choroid. This is a very dark-colored layer packed with blood vessels and pigments. Those pigments are super important because they absorb stray light, preventing internal reflection that would otherwise totally blur our vision. Plus, those blood vessels are constantly pumping essential oxygen and nutrients to the retina. Moving a bit deeper, the light travels through the pupil. And here's the fun fact. The pupil isn't actually a physical structure. It's literally just a hole. It's a central opening controlled by the colored part of your eye, the iris. The iris has two specific types of muscles that constantly adjust that pupil's size to control exactly how much light gets in. Once it's through the pupil, light hits the lens. This is an elastic, biconvex, and totally transparent structure designed to precisely focus light. But how does it stay put? Well, it's suspended perfectly in place by suspensory ligaments. These ligaments attach to the ciliary body, which is a thickened part of the choroid containing specialized ciliary muscles. Together, they act like this brilliant biological pulley system, altering tension to actively change the shape of the lens. Finally, our bent and focused light hits the ultimate destination, the retina. Think of it like a projector screen at the back of the eye, lined with vital receptor cells. We have rods, which respond to low-intensity dim light, giving us our black and white night vision and peripheral vision. Then we have cones, which respond to bright light, delivering sharp, clear, full-color vision. The absolute most important spot on this retina is the yellow spot. It's a tiny indentation packed with the highest concentration of cones, giving you your clearest possible vision. On the flip side, just below that, is the blind spot. This is exactly where the optic nerve leaves the eye to head to the cerebrum, and where blood vessels enter. There are 0 rods or cones here, meaning you literally have no vision in this tiny specific spot. Oh, and before we move on, we have to mention the fluids keeping this whole thing inflated. The watery aqueous humor sits up front between the cornea and lens to maintain the cornea's shape. Meanwhile, the jelly-like vitreous humor fills up the massive space behind the lens, keeping the entire eyeball perfectly round. Both of these fluids also pitch in a bit to help refract light. All right, Section 2, the pupillary mechanism adapting to light intensity. So with the anatomy mapped out, let's look at our first active biological response. The pupillary mechanism is a direct antagonistic reflex action. Its whole job is to protect the sensitive retina from getting blasted with too much light. Picture walking outside on a super sunny day. You want less light entering to prevent damage, right? So the circular muscles of the iris contract, while the radial muscles relax. This makes the pupil constrict or shrink, heavily reducing incoming light. But then you walk into a dark movie theater. The exact opposite happens. The radial muscles of the iris contract and the circular muscles relax. This antagonistic action causes the pupil to widen or dilate, capturing as much light as humanly possible so you can actually find your seat. Moving on to Section 3, focusing via accommodation, near versus distant vision. So the crucial trick isn't just letting light in, it's bending it accurately onto the retina.
Let's break down how this works for a near object, meaning something less than 6 meters away from your face. The light bouncing off a close object is spreading out widely, so your eye has to work pretty hard to bend it back together. Here is the exact biological sequence. First, the ciliary muscles contract. Actually, this is where it gets a little counterintuitive. When they contract, the ciliary body moves inward, which causes the suspensory ligaments to slacken or loosen. Because the ligaments are loose, the pulling tension on the elastic lens drops. Freed from that tension, the lens naturally bulges outwards, becoming much more convex. This bulgy convex shape refracts the light rays heavily, snapping a clear image perfectly onto the retina. Now, conversely, let's look at distant vision, objects more than 6 meters away. Light rays from way out there enter the eye almost parallel, meaning they barely need any bending at all. So in this case, the ciliary muscles just relax, moving backward and away from the lens. This outward shift pulls those suspensory ligaments incredibly tight, making them completely taut. Because the ligaments are pulling so hard, the tension on the lens increases dramatically. This literally stretches the lens out, making it much flatter or less convex. A flatter lens bends the light rays much less, which is exactly the subtle touch needed to land that distant image right onto the retina. Which brings us to Section 4, Visual Defects and Treatments, when the journey of light is interrupted. Now that we know how the perfect biological machinery operates, what happens when it's slightly off? Let's start with focal length defects. If you're short-sighted, you can see your phone perfectly, but distant objects are just a blur. Biologically, your eyeball might be slightly too long, or your lens is stuck being too convex. The result? The bent light forms an image slightly in front of the retina, missing the screen entirely. We fix this with prescription concave lenses, which diverge the light a bit before it enters the eye, effectively pushing the focal point further back. On the flip side, we have long-sightedness. The horizon looks great, but reading a book? Huge struggle. Here, the eyeball is a bit too short, or the lens is too flat. By the time the light rays hit the retina, they haven't converged yet. The image would technically form behind the retina. The treatment is wearing convex lenses to start bending the light rays together before they even hit your cornea. Beyond eyeball length, we run into structural and aging defects. Astigmatism happens when there's an irregular curvature of the cornea or the lens. Because the surface is wavy or uneven, incoming light scatters and focuses unevenly on the retina. It causes blurred vision and a lot of squinting, but it's highly treatable with specialized prescription glasses, contact lenses, or laser therapy to reshape the cornea. Then we have a defect that is intimately tied to aging: cataracts. Earlier, we mentioned the lens needs to be perfectly transparent, but with age, the proteins inside the lens can start to break down and form clumps. These clumps literally cloud the lens. As the cataract grows, it physically blocks light from entering the eye. Take the case study from our source material, a 60-year-old woman named Kais who was legally blind without glasses, and eventually, the cataracts would have blinded her entirely. The life-changing treatment here is a super common surgery, where the clouded biological lens is removed entirely and replaced with a tiny crystal-clear artificial lens implant. It is absolutely wild to think that all these intricate mechanisms, the dilation of the pupil, the slackening of suspensory ligaments, the chemical reactions firing in the rods and cones, are just preparing a raw signal for the optic nerve. Because of the physics of how lenses work, the image projected onto your retina is actually upside down and backwards. It leaves you wondering, just how much of the right-side-up vibrant world we experience every day is actually a brilliant construction of our brains decoding these signals. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer of the human eye. Until next time, keep your focus sharp and your curiosity bright.